Hello, everyone, and welcome to my latest Star Wars book review. And since it is the first month of the new year, it's a time of new beginnings. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to take a look at something that was a beginning for Star Wars. So today we will be looking at Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which I don't own a physical copy of, but I do have this nice little... Kindles are great, I'm just saying. But yeah, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was written by Alan Dean Foster, who also wrote the novelization of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and of The Force Awakens as well, which I've reviewed in previous videos. But this is a very interesting piece of Star Wars media. So this was the very first Star Wars novel outside of the novelization of A New Hope. So this is the first, kind of official sequel to Star Wars, and supposedly, according to sources, the plan was to have this serve as the basis for a low-budget sequel to Star Wars in case the movie's not a hit. So if Star Wars wasn't the big, pop culture phenomenon that it ultimately became, Lucas would have been allowed to make a smaller budget, potentially would have been allowed to make a smaller budget sequel. And that story for the smaller budget sequel was the basis for Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which Alan Dean Foster wrote the novelization for. Now, because Star Wars became the hit that it became, we got Empire Strikes Back instead. So Splinter of the Mind's Eye has kind of been not ignored per se, but I think its significance as a piece of Star Wars media is often overlooked because it was a bestseller when it came out. I mean, Star Wars fever was just running rampant, so anything with Star Wars on it was guaranteed to sell. But I think when most people think of the expanded universe, they credit the Dark Empire trilogy from Marvel, or not from Marvel, from Dark Horse, and the Thrawn trilogy, the three novels by Timothy Zahn, as being the main things that really started the expanded universe. And that's true to a point. They were the first things that really came out that got people excited about more Star Wars material and kind of rejuvenated the brand. But really, the start of the expanded universe really begins here with Splinter of the Mind's Eye. It was the first novel written for Star Wars after the release of the original film. So it was the first one to really expand on what we saw in the films. And because of that, I think it's definitely worth a look. It's a very interesting piece of media because very much like how the novelization to A New Hope went, there are aspects to it that really don't feel like classic Star Wars. It didn't feel like they had everything fully mapped out yet. Or, like I said when I reviewed the novelization of A New Hope, things as simple as the Force not being capitalized in text. Things like that, where it's okay, this is very early. A lot of the traditional aspects of Star Wars aren't fully established yet. And I think for that alone, it's very interesting to take a look at these very early pieces where it doesn't feel like they're fitting themselves into a box. It feels like they're still kind of, wild, wild west, just kind of exploring and trying to figure this out. And this story really, if it had been released as a sequel to A New Hope as a movie, I think it would have been a disappointment. But as a side story that kind of serves as a companion piece to the franchise, I think it's a fairly enjoyable read. And the added history of it being the very first Star Wars novel after the first movie gives a little bit of historical significance. So it's definitely worth a look for all those reasons. So what's the story about? Well, Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker, who are the main focus of the film, along with C-3PO and R2-D2, go on a mission for the rebellion, and while on this alien world, they hear about, from an old woman, they hear about the existence of the Kyber crystal. I believe it's spelled K-A-I-B-U-R-R. And this is a MacGuffin that amplifies one's ability with the Force. And Leia and Luke have to go through Imperial troops and this labyrinth, maze-like thing, various creatures and monsters, and then ultimately they have to come face to face with Darth Vader to get the crystal away from him. So a fair, again, not the most epic sequel to the original Star Wars, but as a side story, I think it works really well. Han Solo and Chewbacca are not in the story at all. Now, supposedly that's because, again, this was designed as a sequel, and Harrison Ford was not tied down for a sequel initially. So there's no guarantee that Han Solo was going to be in the next movie, if a new movie was even going to get made. So Han Solo's exclusion from the story is quite jarring initially, but when you take other factors into play, it actually kind of makes sense. And actually, if you want to bring other expanded universe stories into play, you can say it's like, oh, this is what Luke and Leia were doing while Han Solo and Chewbacca and Lando were all messing around during the events of Scoundrels. So in my own headcanon, I like to think that Scoundrels and Splinter of the Mind's Eye are happening concurrently, but it's and by the way, I am going to review Scoundrels at some point, along with a few other Timothy Zahn entries in the series that don't involve Thrawn necessarily. But anyway, so they're on the hunt for the Kyber crystal, and really this one kind of plays with the idea of Leia and Luke being more of a romantic couple and being kind of flirty with each other and even kind of butting heads a little bit throughout there. So it kind of feels like you're getting Han and Luke all in one character with all the different ways he interacts with Leia. It's, again, that's one of those things that's kind of creepy in hindsight when it's ultimately revealed that Luke and Leia are brother and sister, and they don't, consummate their relationship or romance at all here. But there's a lot of, flirty back and forth going on, and some arguments and a few other things. So it's, again, it's a little creepy once you've seen Return of the Jedi, but again, taking into account that this was the first thing written after the original Star Wars, and Alan Dean Foster, he didn't know where this was going. I'm not even convinced Lucas knew exactly where everything was going to go. So it's one of those things that future reveals kind of made this a little bit more comfortable to read. But again, that makes it more interesting for me in the sense that, this was clearly written before they knew what was going to happen in Empire and Return of the Jedi. So it's kind of fun to see how it fits in with all the other puzzle pieces left behind from the rest of the franchise. And even the MacGuffin, the Kyber crystal, this artifact that amplifies one's power with the Force, feels like a foreign entity that you wouldn't see in any other Star Wars story, because it really kind of goes against my understanding of the Force, where it's it's within you, it's within everything around you. It's not some magical artifact that you can pick up and all of a sudden you're more powerful. And actually Luke he actually disarms Darth Vader at the end of the story, which I'm really glad that this didn't get made into a movie, because that would kind of spoil Empire a little bit. But it's the whole MacGuffin device of the Kyber crystal, it's very odd. Again, you wouldn't see a plot device like this in most other Star Wars stories. And again, I think that can be chalked up to they didn't fully have the lore and an understanding of all the concepts down yet. And that's not the fault of the writer. It's not the fault, not even really the fault of Lucas. They were just still trying to figure things out. And I think in Lucas's mind, I don't know if he knew. He may say that he had the whole trilogy mapped out, the entire saga mapped out, but I don't think he anticipated making more than one. Because how can you predict a hit like that? You can't. Unless George Lucas really is just smarter than the rest of us and, some kind of clairvoyant. But, so it's got a lot of weird, odd aspects to it that wouldn't normally fit into most Star Wars stories. And even some fans, I remember back in the 90s, and this is before I even had a chance to read the book, some fans would even debate whether or not the story is even canon within the expanded universe, because it does feel so radically different from everything else that would come after that, over a decade and a half, close to a decade and a half later. And even in my own mind, it's hard to consider that Luke Skywalker even defeated Darth Vader at some point prior to Return of the Jedi. It was to me that kind of undermines it. But again, they didn't know where this was going. So, a couple of interesting things that do happen. We get Princess Leia using a lightsaber. That's kind of neat. That's kind of interesting. Something that the movies never really gave us. So you get more of a less victimized and more proactive and warrior-style Princess Leia, while also still being the commander in charge, the princess, giving all the orders. and that's where some of her conflicts with Luke come in. But yeah, so a bunch of aspects to this, like I talked about, the MacGuffin is really weird. Luke and Vader's interactions don't feel like they fit. Han and Chewie not being in it doesn't feel right. So there's a lot of things about it that make it feel like this really weird, offbeat, foreign piece of media. But I think in a weird way that kind of gives it its charm. And for the historical significance of it being the first Star Wars novel, I do think it's worth a look. I think it's definitely worth a read. I can't guarantee that you'll like it. I know some people that absolutely can't friggin' stand this book and disregard it as canon. Other people like it and appreciate it for what it is. I'm more in the middle with it, I guess. It is a fun read. It's well written, I think. And again, I think a lot of the issues with it come from the fact of what came later and what we know and what we identify with Star Wars and all the concepts of Star Wars. And here, this feels like something that was written almost to capitalize on the popularity of Star Wars, but it wasn't even that. It was something that was going to be written whether Star Wars was the huge hit it ultimately was or not. But it feels like something that they just kind of... again, not because it's poorly written, but because it's a lot of the things that have to do with it don't feel like it fits within what we know as Star Wars. But because of that, I do think it's an interesting read, and I do think it's definitely worth checking out. And Alan Dean Foster is a talented writer. I actually really liked his novelization for A New Hope, and I thought his novelization for Force Awakens is actually better than the movie. So the dude knows what's up, and it's really amazing to me that he was able to take George Lucas's vision and take a bunch of things that probably were not explained real well and make like a semi-coherent story to it and give it a little bit of extra flavor and give it a little bit more and utilize those concepts to the best of their abilities. I think he deserves credit for that, and I think Splinter of the Mind's Eye in some ways is his most interesting contribution to Star Wars. I would say that his best book is probably the novelization for A New Hope, but Splinter of the Mind's Eye kind of has his stamp on it, and that was his interesting contribution to the franchise. So, like I said, it's a very... it might be a jarring read for some Star Wars purists because of it does break away from what we saw in Empire and Return of the Jedi and future material since then. But if you read it with the right mindset and accept it for what it is, it's actually a really solid read. And I actually got a kick out of it reading it this last time in preparation for this review. So take that for what it's worth. So that concludes this review. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and stay tuned next month and for the months that follow, because I'll have plenty more Star Wars reviews lined up for you.